My name is Trevor. I'm the Communication Manager for the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. It is the latest in the fall leg of our 2025 webinar season. If you are new to our webinar, a little background on our group. CCSN works to connect patients, survivors, and other stakeholder groups with decision makers and the wider community to engage in discussion and to act on evidence-based best practices to alleviate the medical, emotional, financial, and social costs of cancer. To learn more, visit survivornet.ca. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube, and a link will be provided by the email you registered with, along with a link to the slides provided with this presentation. We will have a quick Q&A session at the end, but if you would like, please put in the questions in the chat function. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. This webinar was made possible by grants from AbbVie, Amgen, AstraZeneca, Eisai, Bristol Myers Squibb, Janssen, and Merck. It is because of their continued support that we can host the CCSN webinar series, and thank them for their commitment to our educational endeavors. And now I would like to introduce our presenter for today, Mina Yun. Mina Yun is a two-time breast cancer survivor who recognized a major gap in cancer care, the lack of credible, detailed guidance on nutrition during and after treatment. The advice she encountered was often vague, conflicting, and even harmful. Determined to change that, she formalized her education as a certified oncology nutrition consultant and dedicated her career to closing that gap. Today, Mina combines her lived experience with evidence-based functional nutrition to support women who are newly diagnosed in treatment or navigating survivorship. She delivers clear, practical strategies that restore well-being and bring clarity to an overlooked stage of care. And so without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mina for her talk, Breast Cancer Survivorship Nutrition, What You Eat After Treatment Matters.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction, Trevor. It is my privilege and honor to spend the next hour with you today to hopefully clarify all the confusion around nutrition. Before we get started, I do want to share a little more background about myself. I have been a personal trainer and holistic health coach for over 20 years, and I spent most of my career really dedicated to teaching people on how they can improve their health and optimize their health, but also to look at ways that you can help prevent certain diseases like heart attack, stroke, cancer, and many other chronic diseases. So imagine my own shock that I myself get diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017 and again in 2020. And I thought to myself, like, wow, like all the stuff that I did still wasn't enough to prevent cancer, which just goes to show the pervasiveness of this type of disease and how complicated it can be. But I thought, maybe it wasn't enough to prevent cancer, but maybe this will be the thing that'll help me survive it. And not only help me survive the disease, cancer, but help me maybe survive the treatments, because we all know that's no party either. And, even though I have a lot of knowledge around holistic health, I mean, this is cancer. So I don't know, do I know enough to support myself throughout this journey? So I started looking for a lot of other health professionals to help me with nutrition advice. And some of the nutrition advice I got, just based on what I knew about human nutrition, I'm thinking, I don't think that's the way to go. But again, this is cancer. What do I know? So I kind of followed along and made some changes based on the advice that I got. And over the years, progressively got weaker, more lethargic, lightheaded, and it got to the point where I could not get through a day without a nap. And it got so bad that many days I was taking naps twice a day, just absolutely unheard of. And this is when I thought to myself, like I don't know about this diet that's supposed to save my life. Might also be the thing that'll kill me. And so I finally just took matters into my own hands and enrolled in the Oncology Nutrition Institute. And this is where so many things got clarified for me. And in particular, one of the things that I learned about nutrition is that everything you hear, everything is half true. And that's why there are so many conflicts, and you're going to hear so many things that actually completely disagree with each other. You hear something like sugar causes cancer. That's half true. Or if you also hear sugar does not cause cancer, it's also half true. There are half truths everywhere. And so this is what I hope to clarify and give you a little bit more context in terms of all the different kinds of nutrition guidelines that are out there. Before I start this webinar, I do want to have a note for those of you with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. I do understand that this webinar is entitled Breast Cancer Nutrition, What You Eat After Treatment Matters. And I want to acknowledge that for you with stage 4, treatment will never end. And I also want to acknowledge that out of the millions and billions of dollars that get raised for breast cancer research, a shockingly small percentage gets allocated towards metastatic breast cancer. So I just want you to know that if that is you, you are welcome here, and this information will just be as pertinent for you. Now, the big question, when this happens, when the diagnosis happens, oftentimes the first question we ask is, why did I get breast cancer? So I want to share a story of a woman that I met. It was a couple years ago, and she had recently been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she has no family history. She's otherwise pretty healthy. So she asked her oncologist, why? Why did I get breast cancer? What did I do? Okay. And that doctor, bless her heart, she said, well, you're a woman. And to be honest, that doctor is not wrong, because the statistic shows that 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with invasive breast cancer at some point in their life. So in other words, being a woman is the greatest risk factor for getting breast cancer. Okay. But I also understand why the doctor said that. That doctor's trying to say it's not your fault. But I also hated what that doctor said, because what that doctor is also saying is you also have no control, and there's nothing you can do about preventing this breast cancer from coming back or from progressing and continuing to get worse. And I really hated that statement, because here's another really horrible statistic. You finish treatments, congratulations, you get to celebrate, but you also realize that the real work begins. Because you may not know this, but nearly 30% of women diagnosed with early stage breast cancer will still eventually go on to develop metastatic disease. So even though you've gone through all the treatments, for roughly a third of us, those treatments will not work and it will progress to stage 4. And are you okay with thinking that there's nothing you can do about it and that it'll just be your luck and it's a numbers game? I refuse to believe that. And I really believe there is so much you can do with nutrition, with lifestyle, with all these other things available to you, and that you have much more power than you're being led to believe. So let's get to it then. Here's a different way that I want you to think about cancer. This is an analogy that I love, and it's regarding the seed versus the soil. So if you're on this call and maybe you're a really good gardener, I'm a horrible gardener. I could probably kill a cactus, and even plastic plants should fear entering my home. Okay, but anyways, let's suppose you are a gardener and you notice weeds pop up in your lawn. And you know that you didn't plant those weed seeds in your lawn. You know that they just kind of float in the air and they land in your soil and they take root in your lawn. So when those weeds do pop up, what do? You'll oftentimes pull them out. And it's a lot like surgery, pulling the cancer out. Or you might think of spraying them with some type of weed killer. And that's what doctors do. They might do chemo radiation to kill the cancer. But another thing that you can do is you can nurture the soil. If you think of your grass and you water that lawn and the roots of the grass grow deep and strong, it actually allows the grass to potentially choke out the weeds and create an environment that makes it difficult for weeds to thrive. So we just let the doctors do what they need to do to pull and poison the weeds. So like to do the surgery, the chemo, the radiation. But people like us, we come in to nurture their body, to water the lawn. All right. And the two together work really well to really make sure that the treatments do the job that they're supposed to do, and to strengthen your body so that you have a fighting chance to keep the cancer from coming back or from progressing. And you also really need to understand what's happening in your body at all times. You may not know this, but your body, give or take a few, but it performs 2 trillion cell divisions per day. And every single cell, in order to replicate, needs to perfectly replicate 6 billion letters of DNA in every single cell. So there are so many things that are happening in your body. Now, every time you photocopy something or you spread a rumor, there's broken telephone, you're going to have typos, you're going to have photocopying errors. In fact, every single cell will have a minimum of 10,000 DNA lesions per day. So in other words, every cell has 10,000 itty bitty typos in every single cell. So think of all the opportunities that there are in your body every day for something to go wrong. Now, most of these DNA lesions, they're really nothing to worry about. For the most part, your immune system, your body will seek and find these DNAs. Well, it's totally easy to correct or to remove or to kill off. But how well your body does that is dependent on the terrain of your body. So the quality of your terrain may influence whether damaged cells are repaired, removed, or whether those cells escape detection. And this is the birthplace of where cancer could potentially start. So we talk about the terrain. There's actually 10 different ways, at least that we know of, where we consider the terrain of your body. So I'm going to go through these 10 different aspects of your terrain, and in no particular order, they are genetics and epigenetics. Genetics is what you inherit from your parents. They're your genes. Okay, it's the blueprint of what you inherit. Epigenetics is the science of how things that happen outside of you, like your food, your environment, your lifestyle, how they can affect whether your genetics actually express themselves. So, in other words, you could potentially inherit a defective gene or a gene mutation, but that gene mutation never has to express itself if you treat it the right way. And by the way, when it comes to genetics and breast cancer or genetics and cancer in general, anywhere from 5 to maybe 10%, maybe 15%, but it's probably closer to 5 to 10% of all cancers are caused by gene mutations. So in other words, nearly 95% of all cancers have nothing to do with your genes and everything to do with your environment. Another part of the terrain is blood sugar balance. And this is how your body is able to handle and digest and use glucose. Another one is blood circulation. And this is how your body is able to circulate blood through the body. So this will have a lot to do with your heart health, your lung health to a degree, and your blood vessels. Immune system. The health of your immune system can make or break whether your body has the strength to fight against cancer. And then we have mental and emotional well-being. How you feel and how you think really truly matters. So you never want to discount that either. Inflammation. Now, inflammation is not entirely a bad thing. For example, if you cut your finger, then you'll notice that the area around that cut will kind of get a little puffy. And that's your body sending all these white blood cells to that area to stave off infection and help to heal that area. So that is inflammation. That inflammation is good. But the idea is that once that finger heals, the inflammation should go away. So inflammation flows in to heal something and then it goes away. And the problem, what's happening in our modern day society, we are doing a lot of things in our lifestyle that are causing low grade chronic inflammation all the time, which actually starts to create a lot of issues in the body and creates an environment where cancer loves to thrive. Next is toxic burden. Everything is toxic. I don't know if you've noticed. I mean, I do so many things to try and, keep a toxin-free household. And then I read something on the news to find out something I've been doing actually is going to kill you. So like, I get it. I know it's a lot and there's chemicals everywhere, but there are certain things that you can do to help reduce that toxic load. Hormone balance. Particularly for those of you with hormone-positive breast cancers, this is something that you may have paid a lot of attention to because there is a great link with estrogen and hormone-positive breast cancers. Next is stress and biorhythms. I mean, gosh, we are stressed a lot. We are really stressed, but finding ways to manage that stress is really important, but also honoring how our body's cyclic rhythm or circadian rhythm works, which is the biorhythm. So there are many ways that our body functions throughout the day that are timed according to the time of day, whether it's light outside or dark outside. There are different ways that our body functions. So it's really important that we honor the way our body's supposed to function according to the day. And the final one is digestion and the microbiome. So digestion is everything that happens once food enters our mouth and it goes out the other end through our anus. So from mouth to anus. And the microbiome has to do with all those, I like to consider it like our body's kind of like an internal tropical ecosystem. And I don't know if you've heard this before. There are trillions of cells in our body. And one time I was once told that 10% of those cells are human. So 90% of those cells are not human, and they're like little critters, microscopic bugs in our body. We're mostly 90% bugs, which is gross when you think about it. Now, more recent research are showing it's probably still actually closer to 50%, which is still gross, okay? But this microbiome plays a huge importance in our health. There are very healthy microbes that are critical for optimal health, and we want to make sure that we have a good amount of healthy microbes and not allow the unhealthy and the destructive microbes to overtake the overall ecosystem. So very important. Those are the top 10 terrains. So for today's webinar, we're not going to go over all 10. I'm going to focus on what I think are the top 2. And those are, drum roll, blood sugar balance and digestion and microbiome. Some of you might be thinking, wait, you're not going to talk about hormones? Okay, I will touch on hormones, but I'm going to say something a little bold and say that actually it is about the hormones, but it's not about the hormones. And what you'll see is that blood sugar balance and digestion also help regulate hormones. So if you can get control of your blood sugar and your digestion, a lot of times some of the hormonal issues will help sort themselves out. So that's why I really focused on those two instead of making hormones the major focus. But I will touch on hormones, so just hang tight in the next few slides. So let's talk about blood sugar and why I chose blood sugar. Well, for one, here is a statistic that shows that if you have type 2 diabetes and also have breast cancer, you are 50% more likely to die of breast cancer than a woman that does not have type 2 diabetes. And it is a well-known fact that consistently high blood sugar is linked to increased obesity, inflammation, stress, and remember the hormone imbalance, including estrogen dominance. If you have high blood sugar, it does actually create a cascade that can eventually increase blood sugar. However, you might be on the call and be thinking, yeah, but I don't have diabetes. Okay, that may be true. 30% of Canadian women have diabetes or prediabetes, which means 70% do not. For the record, 30% is a horrible statistic. That's way too many of us. But here's something that I want you to understand about diabetes and prediabetes. So prediabetes, for example, by the time you're diagnosed with prediabetes, you may have been experiencing insulin resistance for 10 to 15 years. So I know if you have been told that you're pre-diabetic, it may have been presented to you by your doctor that it's not really a big deal. We'll keep an eye on it. In my opinion, it's a big deal. And I really relate to prediabetes as already an advanced disease state of blood dysregulation, blood sugar dysregulation. So I want to share another analogy with you. Imagine you've just been diagnosed with breast cancer, and your doctor comes up and tells you, so I have bad news. It is breast cancer. The good news is, though, we caught it really early. It's stage 1. So here's the plan. We're going to keep an eye on it. We won't really talk about any treatments. No need to do any treatments now. If it gets to stage 3, we'll start talking about treatment plans. You kind of get that was total crazy talk, right? Well, this is what we're doing with blood sugar. Personally, I think prediabetes is already stage 3, type 2 diabetes being, like stage 4. And you had 10 or 15 years of dysregulated blood sugar that have been totally ignored. And so the crazy thing is there is a way that you can actually test for that. There are blood tests out there for that. They're called C-peptide and fasted insulin, but it's not standard of care to measure that when testing for your blood sugar. So if we don't know you actually have any issues with blood sugar until you're already pre-diabetic, well, how many of us have some level of insulin resistance or blood sugar dysregulation, but we don't know it? Well, because we're not measuring for it, we don't know. We don't know how many there are, but I'll be bold and willing to say that it's most of us have some level of blood sugar dysregulation. Now, if you're not able to take the test, there are clues. So let's look at the clues. Here are some signs and clues of dysregulated blood sugar. You're craving sweets, and especially after eating a full meal. You could have eaten a big giant meal and you are full, but you still need that sugary sweet dessert. And you have the inability to go without food for more than 4 hours. And if you did, you would get lightheaded, you might even get shaky or really irritable. Like you'd get hangry, like the hungry and angry. This is a big sign that you have blood sugar dysregulation. Also, if you say like grab a donut and you immediately, it's like crack, you immediately feel better and like you've got tons of energy now. That is a sign of early stage insulin resistance and dysregulated blood sugar. And the last one, which may surprise you, this is a big one, is you're always waking up in the middle of the night to go pee. And so some of you may be thinking, yeah, no, I just drank a ton of water before I went to bed. And that may be the case if you chugged a liter right before bed. Okay, fine. But for most of you, it's actually your blood sugar. So your body produces a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is a stress response hormone. It helps you manage stress. It also helps to reduce inflammation. It helps give you energy. And it also helps regulate blood sugar. So if you're eating these sugary foods all day and you get these massive sugar spikes and sugar drops and it spikes and drops all day long, and what'll happen in the middle of the night, your blood sugar will drop really low. So this is when your body starts pumping out cortisol, and cortisol will help to regulate and bring the blood sugar back up to a normal level. However, remember I said cortisol gives you energy. It'll also wake you up. So for those of you that are thinking, oh, my bladder woke me up, usually it wasn't the case. You woke up your bladder. And I've worked with many clients over the years that are always waking up in the middle of the night to pee. We make some changes to their diet and some supplementation, and they're now sleeping through the night. It had nothing to do with the strength of their bladder. It had nothing to do with how much water they drank. It had everything to do with their blood sugar. Now we'll talk about the digestion and microbiome and why I chose this topic. So depending on what source you look at, anywhere from 70 to 90% of our immune system resides in our gut. The health of your digestive system will directly impact how strong your immune system works. It also is the major player that helps you digest and assimilate nutrients. And on the flip side, it helps excrete all the toxic waste. So if your digestive system is not working well, you're not able to absorb the nutrients you need for optimal cellular health, and you're also not pooping out the toxins. And if you're not pooping out the toxins, those toxins are able then to potentially get reabsorbed back into your body, and you create a massive toxic load in the body. So very important there. And remember, I went back to the hormones. This digestion is essential for estrogen metabolism and detox. I'm going to talk more about that in the upcoming slides. And finally, there are quite a few different studies out there studying many different aspects of the microbiome and cancer, but a healthy microbiome has been shown to improve the efficacy of all cancer treatments. And in fact, some people that showed that they were missing a very important microbe showed that immunotherapy didn't work for them. So there's a lot of different studies out there for digestion and the microbiome with cancer. Now, here are some signs that you may have digestive stress. This is a big one, is heartburn. And I'm going to talk about this one for some time. This is a really big misunderstanding in the health industry. Heartburn is caused by when the acid in your stomach is allowed to reflux up into your esophagus. Your stomach has a very protective lining that prevents the acid, which is extremely caustic, like battery acid, kind of strong. It should just burn right through your stomach, but this stomach lining helps protect your stomach. Your esophagus does not have this lining, so even if a tiny bit of acid is allowed to reflux up into the esophagus, you're going to feel it. So one of the first things that people do when they experience heartburn is to neutralize the acid. So you might go to the drugstore, get some antacid, or worst case scenario, you go to your doctor and your doctor prescribes a prescription medication, oftentimes known as a proton pump inhibitor or a PPI. And that drug tells your stomach to shut off the pumps that create stomach acid. So you don't even produce stomach acid in the first place. However, only a tiny percentage of people who experience heartburn because they have too much stomach acid. Ironically, the cause of many heartburn issues is not enough stomach acid. So let me explain. At the top of your stomach is a valve, and that valve's job is to stay shut and keep the acid from refluxing up into the esophagus. But sometimes that valve malfunctions, and the main reason why a valve malfunctions is because the environment, the ecosystem inside of the stomach is imbalanced. And one of the major players of that is not enough stomach acid. So ironically, not enough stomach acid allows the valve to malfunction. And even if just a tiny bit of stomach acid gets up into the esophagus, you're going to feel it. So for the vast majority of my clients that do experience heartburn, I actually do things to help them stimulate stomach acid production. And guess what? Their heartburn symptoms disappear and their digestion vastly improves. The next few symptoms here are also symptoms of not enough stomach acid. So one of them is bloating or gas within an hour after eating. So right after eating. And a lot of that is because if you don't have enough stomach acid, it's not digesting the food the way it's supposed to. And now it's entering into the small intestine. And your small intestine doesn't know how to digest all this undigested food. It doesn't know what to do with it. So then this food starts to ferment and putrefy in your intestines, and that causes all of the gas. So it happens very quickly after eating. Another one is meats are difficult to digest. You actually need a lot of stomach acid to digest meat. And if you find that you eat animal proteins and it just sticks and just sits in your stomach, that's why. And as well as just food in general, you're just full for hours. I used to have a client and I did a personal training session with her. We meet at 6:30 p.m. And she was dragging her butt. She's like, oh, I ate dinner so late. I'm so full. Or sorry, I ate lunch so late. I'm so full. And I said, well, what time did you have lunch? Remember, our session's at 6:30. She ate lunch at 2:30. I'm like, girl, that's 4.5 hours ago, right? It's like 7 o'clock now. I was like, no, this is your digestion. So we fixed that. We helped stimulate her digestive process. And now she doesn't have that issue anymore. Right, some other symptoms to look out for is you feel better without eating. because when you do eat, you just feel so bloated or so this or that. You just would rather not eat. Okay, that's a sign of digestive stress. And on the flip side, if you actually go a long time without eating and you feel like a lot of gnawing pain in your gut, that's something that you should actually check with your doctor about, because that's a very common side effect or a symptom of a parasitic infection of something called H. pylori or a Helicobacter pylori. So that's something you should really have checked out if you have that symptom. Now, if you have less than one bowel movement a day, this is very important. You need to be pooping every day. And I have met women who said, well, my doctor tells me that if I poop regularly, like say 3 times a week, that's okay. And I'm like, no, girl, no, that is not okay. Absolutely not okay. You need to poop every day. You need to get those toxins out of your body and working regularly every day. And not just the number of times that you have this bowel movement, it's the quality of your stool. So there's something on there, you can Google it. It's called the Bristol chart. It has some illustrations of what a healthy poop looks like, and it numbers it from 1 to 7. So 1 and 2 being like, the really hard, pebbly rabbit poops. That's like the constipation side. And then you have the numbers like 6 and 7, which are the waterier ones, so more on the diarrhea side. You really want to be in the middle. You'll get a gold star if you have a Bristol chart 3 or 4 poop. So take a look at that Bristol chart, and you want to aim for those kinds of stools. That means you have a healthier digestive system. So as promised, we will touch on estrogen. The thing about estrogen, it's oftentimes oversimplified when we're looking at the role of estrogen and cancer. A lot of people don't know this, but there's more than one kind of estrogen. So there's 3 main types, and they are estrone, called E1, estradiol, which is E2, and estriol, which is E3. Now, many of you may have heard of E2, which is estradiol, because that is the strongest one, and that is the one most likely to grow estrogen-positive breast cancers. That's also the one that's oftentimes measured to find out if you're officially in menopause. So you may have heard a lot about estradiol. However, something that nobody is talking about is estrogen metabolites. These have a profound effect on breast cancers, and yet very few doctors are talking to their patients about estrogen metabolites. So, what are estrogen metabolites? When your body uses up estrogen, then those leftover estrogens get processed in the liver in preparation for excretion through the intestinal tract. So, once they're processed in the liver, they turn into estrogen metabolites. Here's the thing though, one of these estrogen metabolites are pretty healthy and they don't cause a whole lot of drama. The other 2 are quite toxic. So let's talk about them. So we have 2-hydroxy. It's a generally protective and harmless estrogen metabolite. Then we have 4-hydroxy. This is a very toxic metabolite. If allowed to be reabsorbed through the intestinal tract back into the body, it'll start wreaking all kinds of havoc in the body and can potentially cause DNA damage. We also have 16-hydroxy. This is the estrogen metabolite that can also drive the growth of estrogen-positive breast cancers. When your doctors are measuring estrogens, they are mostly just measuring estradiol, but nobody's measuring the estrogen metabolites. So, a word on estrogen and hormone-negative breast cancers. If you are listening to this call and you have triple negative or hormone-negative cancers, then you're like, yeah, but my cancer has no hormone receptors, so I don't have to worry about hormones, right? Nothing can be further from the truth. Remember, we talked about 4-hydroxy. The estrogen metabolite 4-hydroxy has the ability to cause DNA damage and be involved in the development and growth of all breast cancers, including the hormone negative ones. I've always given this thought, and I don't know if you've ever given this thought, but we have hormone positive breast cancers. But did you know that they happen predominantly in postmenopausal women? The population of women with the least amount of estrogen. And then we have hormone negative cancers, and in particular triple negative cancers, which happen predominantly in women under 40, the women who have the most amount of estrogen. And I always thought to myself, shouldn't it be the other way around? And I'm willing to say that this on the screen is one of the major reasons why. That toxic estrogen metabolites are being reabsorbed back into the body and causing all kinds of havoc, hormonal havoc on the body, including for hormone negative ones. And this is also why it's so important to be pooping. If you are not pooping, those estrogen metabolites will stay in the intestinal tract, cause inflammation, get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. So if you have a regular bowel movement, you are much more likely to be able to pull those toxic metabolites out. And also, how do you know which estrogen becomes which estrogen metabolite? You know, are you going to produce the 2-hydroxy or the 4-hydroxy or the 16-hydroxy? All of that is very much dependent on the health of the terrain of your body. And so if you have a healthy hormonal metabolism, then you'll be less likely to create those toxic metabolites and more of the healthier ones. So it's a lot more complicated than it seems, just about, oh, it's just about estrogen and it grows estrogen and I need to lower estrogen. It's a lot more complicated and a little bit more nuanced than that. So let's get to some of the good stuff. Let's talk about, well, what can you do with all of this? And let's talk about some nutrition tips. So really general nutrition tip is you need to have a protein, fiber, and fat with every meal. This kind of combination really helps to prevent your blood sugar from spiking, and getting a lot of those fibers will make sure that you keep regular and have a healthy digestive system. So in general, with every meal, you want to have 3 to 4 ounces of animal protein. A really easy way to eyeball that is 3 ounces of meat is usually the size of a deck of cards, maybe the size of the palm of your hand as well. So it's a really cool way to eyeball that. If you think of a plate and you divide it into 4, 1/4 of that plate will be your animal protein, and the remainder of the plate will be all kinds of different vegetables. So you really want a generous serving, and raw or cooked is just as fine. And we'll talk more about that in the upcoming slides. And you want healthy fats with every meal. So let's go into each of these factors in a little more detail. When it comes to animal proteins, where you get your animal proteins matters. So you want to try whenever possible to source pasture-raised meats or grass-fed meats, wild caught, whenever possible. If you cannot afford that or budget is tight, then you want to include some meats that maybe say antibiotic free or naturally raised. Organic is also okay as well. It is not the same as pasture raised or grass fed, but it is better than conventionally raised meats. Or you can develop a relationship with your local butcher who may be able to source local meats and that they know the farmers and how they take care of their livestock. The other thing as well is how you prepare your meat is also important. You want to cook it in a very low heat. This will be a lot lower than many of you are used to. We're talking 135 degrees Celsius or 275 degrees Fahrenheit. If you cook above that temperature, you will begin to degrade all of those really healthy, beautiful, anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids in those meats. So you want to cook low and slow. The higher the temperature you go, you will also risk producing a compound known as heterocyclic aromatic amines, which is also, I think, HAAs, HCAs, something like that. But it is a known carcinogen. So if you're thinking of like really high temperature barbecues or flame grilling or broiling, those can eventually cause some carcinogenic compounds in the meat. Regarding the vegetables, you want to aim for a variety of vegetables. Variety matters. Think throughout the week. Throughout the week, you want to get 20 to 40 different kinds of vegetables throughout the week. So a really great thing you could do is once a week, try a new vegetable that you normally don't eat and just try to rotate and get new things in there. Now, the good news is herbs and spices count as a vegetable. So start to use a wide variety of herbs, gets lots of flavor in there, and you're able to feed the healthy microbes. The healthy microbes in your gut love fiber and they love a variety of fibers. So by eating a variety of fibers, you're able to help support the growth of all different kinds of healthy bacteria in your gut. Now, when it comes to herbs and spices, the dried herbs are just as good as the fresh ones. So if you're one of those people that you buy a bunch of basil and then you get through a few sprigs and the rest kind of rot, it's totally okay to get the dried versions. They're just as healthy. So really great way to add healthy fibers into your diet. And the variety of vegetables is more important than the volume of vegetables. So if I have a huge bowl of salad and I've got at least 10 different kinds of vegetables and herbs in there, that is 100 times better than that same bowl of salad and I just have kale. I don't care how good kale is for you, just kale is not going to cut it. So variety is more important than the volume. So you want a whole bunch of many different kinds versus a whole bunch of one kind. And then for some of you, if you have difficulty digesting raw vegetables, which is the case for many people, it's totally fine to lightly cook them and it will help to break down the plant fibers, make it much more easier for you to digest and still just as healthy. All right, let's talk about fats. Gosh, fats have really gone through the ringer over the generations. I don't know for those of you that are around in the 80s. I remember being a child in the 80s, being terrified of eating an egg because it has too much cholesterol and eggs will kill you. So all these fats have been totally demonized, but so we don't even know what the healthy fat is anymore. And there's still actually a lot of contentious arguments around healthy fats. In my opinion, if that fat existed in your great grandparents' days, then it's a healthy fat. If it was designed by Mother Nature, it's a healthy fat. Now, however, I do think you should emphasize most of your diet on monounsaturated fats. So that's most plant fats, such as extra virgin olive oil, avocados and avocado oil, and raw nuts and seeds. You may want to consider limiting the amount of animal fats or saturated fats that you would consume. That would be considered butter, cheese, coconut oil, beef tallow, and lard. Now, coconut oil is a bit of an outlier because it is a plant fat, and yet it's actually very high in saturated fats. So the reason why I have this suggestion here is that there was a study that came out that showed women with breast cancer that ate a diet high in saturated fats had a worse prognosis and higher incidences of recurrence and progression of disease. Now, remember I said way at the beginning that everything is half true. I think this is half true because there are no studies that differentiate where you source these fats from. Like, where did these women eat these fats? Did they eat a grass-fed steak or did they eat a hot dog? Those are two totally different protein sources and fat sources, and yet none of these studies differentiate between any of them. So I'm not convinced that saturated fats cause or worsen breast cancer, but let's err on the safe side and make most of your fats coming from monounsaturated fats. When it comes to fiber, we need a lot of it. Minimum 25 grams of fiber daily. And if you look at what it takes to eat that amount, well, that's 6 to 8 cups of cooked vegetables or 10 to 12 cups of raw vegetables. So most of you right now can already see, wow, I'm nowhere getting that much. Okay. But we will look at some other ways that you might be able to supplement that in a future slide. All right. We are not drinking enough water. Dehydration is one of the major causes, probably the greatest cause of constipation. And again, if you're constipated, you're not pooping. And if you're not pooping, you're not detoxing toxins or estrogen metabolites. So remember that. you need to be aiming for 8 glasses of filtered water daily. 8 glasses is 64 ounces. So 1 glass is 8 ounces, which actually is not a lot of water if you measured it out. And a really good practice to do is to add a pinch of sea salt or trace minerals drops to every glass of water. It actually really helps to turn your water into an electrolyte and allows your body to assimilate and absorb the water so much better. I know of an esthetician, and she worked with a holistic nutritionist, and all of the holistic nutritionist clients come in and the esthetician just saying, oh, their skin is just so hydrated. Like she can tell it's because they're drinking water, right? So it's good for your body, it's good for your skin, everything inside and out. Now, you'll notice I say filtered water. And some of you are maybe using, say, something like a Brita filter, which, look, it's better than nothing, but there are better options out there. So here's something that you can consider. The best ones are reverse osmosis filters. One that I really love, a company is called AquaTrue, and the reason why I love it is that they have desktop ones that sit on your countertop, and it's like a little bit bigger than a coffee maker, and it will actually reverse osmosis your water, so you don't have to get a plumber to come in to install an undersink unit or anything fancy like that. Another really great option is something called the Zero Water Filter, which looks exactly like a Brita filter, and it's only a little bit more expensive than a Brita filter, so a very affordable option. Now, one thing that you need to know about any of these options, reverse osmosis or the Zero Water Filter, is that they actually filter everything. They filter all the good along with the bad. So all those trace minerals, they're gone. So do not drink this water without remineralizing it. So whether you use a pinch of sea salt or Redmond salt or like Celtic sea salt or Himalayan crystal salt, or whether you use trace minerals, you must remineralize it. Extremely important. But get your water. And here's some other little tips that you can use that make a really big impact in your life. And one of them is you could consider adding a tablespoon, like just chugging a shot of apple cider vinegar 10 minutes before your meals. Another option is you could use digestive bitters. You can find that at any health food store. I would prefer that you get the alcohol-free ones, but they're bitter, right? And you know that the apple cider vinegar is really sour. You can dilute that with a little bit of water and drink that before your meals, and the bitterness will actually help your stomach to produce more gastric juices and will make a big difference in the quality of your digestion. Something else that you can do, and just really great to add fiber so you're not eating all those vegetables, is to consume 1 to 2 heaping tablespoons minimum of fresh ground flax seeds every day. So it's a great source of fiber, but flax seeds in particular have the ability to latch on to estrogen metabolites and pull them out of the body. So that really helps you to detox estrogen metabolites. And one more thing that you can add are some really great probiotic foods. These could include unsweetened plain yogurt or Greek yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso paste, or miso soup. You add a little bit of that to your diet every day, and it'll really help to feed the healthy bacteria in your gut. Some things that you want to avoid, hopefully this goes without saying, but you want to be avoiding processed meats, refined sugars, and grains. Grains meaning the healthy grains would be grains that look the way they looked when they grew out of the ground, like maybe like oats or quinoa or maybe corn to a degree, and it'll be less like crackers, okay, or Wonder Bread. All right, so those would be refined grains, and refined sugars would be the sugar. Okay, and alcohol, which just earlier this year was officially classified as a class 1 carcinogen. Dried fruits only because it's too easy to eat a whole handful of them, which is the equivalent of eating a basket of fruits, and it's a very high sugar load. And then fruit juices, unless it's freshly squeezed, if it's store-bought juice, it's very likely it's been boiled and pasteurized and it's been chemically processed, and they even add flavor to it, and it's been fortified because all the natural vitamins, most of them died in the pasteurization process, just all of this. So if you're getting commercially bought fruit juice, it's not quite the health food that you think it is. And then milk. I know many of us are trying to drink more milk because it's good for our bones and calcium, and there's a lot of vitamins in there. But the truth is most of us, most of the population after the age of 8 become lactose intolerant. We stop producing lactase. So that's one thing. So if you do drink milk, it's very difficult to digest and it produces a lot of digestive inflammation and stress. We really don't want that. The other thing as well is an overabundance of dairy and milk in particular could potentially raise a hormone known as insulin-like growth factor, which has been linked to the growth and proliferation of cancer and breast cancer. But if you do want to get some dairy products for, calcium or anything like that, better options would be yogurts. Some cheeses have no lactose in them, and those types of products. Okay, but milk is probably not something that I would really recommend as a health food. So I do realize that these are not nutrition tips, but I can't not do a webinar without talking about these really important lifestyle tips. And one of them is to find a way to be active. At the very least, just walk for 10 to 15 minutes after your meals or after your biggest meal. It doesn't have to be a lot. Physical activity has been shown over and over again to improve prognosis from cancer. And in particular, doing a light walk after your meals vastly improves your blood sugar. Now, there are the many toxins around us. Beauty care products, so many of them have products that mimic estrogen. So these ingredients would be things like parabens, sulfates, and phthalates. So how do you know? There are two really great resources that you can use. So one of them is a website called ewg.org, where it will tell you and rate the toxicity of many, many kinds of products on the market. And another one that's, good enough. If you like to shop at Sephora, there's a label called Clean at Sephora, and it's free of all of those ingredients. So that's also a really great resource that you can use. Cleaning products as well, almost all of them are very toxic and create a toxic burden in our body. Do not discount the power of vinegar and baking soda. Those two will take you far in life. So see if you can replace many cleaning products. And also cleaning products, you'll find them on ewg.org. You'll be able to find some really great options there. But I just love vinegar and baking soda. I mix the two together and they clean just about everything in the house. So really great options. And then plastic is a big contributor to estrogen mimicking compounds. So plastic food storage, like plastic Tupperware, is a big source, and plastic water bottles is another one. Now, if that's not really feasible for you to replace all of your plastic containers with glass ones, what you could do is after you have leftovers, make sure the food has cooled down before you put them in the plastic container and put them away in the fridge for storage. It's the heat that leaches the plastics into your food. And alternatively, when you're ready to warm up the food, take it out of the plastic container and put it in the microwave or wherever it is that you're going to warm it up. And that will help to reduce the leaching of the plastic in the food. And that's an alternative option. And there are a few other general nutrition diets and approaches that are worth exploring. I'm just going to really touch on them. And one of them is time-restricted eating, also known as intermittent fasting, also known as fasting. So you can fast anywhere from 12 to 14 to 18 to 18 hours to 3 days to 5 days of just water. There's many different kinds of fasting approaches out there. The research is strong on the benefits of fasting for cancer, as well as the benefits of fasting when you're going through chemo and radiation. It actually helps chemo and radiation to work more effectively to kill the cancer. There's a lot of research. It's very strong. I do have a however. I do also feel, however, that fasting on a regular basis can be a little bit catastrophic for women who still have menstrual periods. So there's a really great book out there called Fast Like a Girl. It's written by Dr. Mindy Pelz, and she talks about how you can time your fasting around your menstrual cycles to help support the hormonal fluctuations that happens. But I think that's a really worthwhile nutrition approach that you can look into. The other one is the Mediterranean diet, which, to be honest, the nutrition advice I just gave you here is mostly Mediterranean, in like some healthy meats, tons of vegetables, and plant-based fats. That's kind of the Mediterranean diet right there. And one more thing that's also very much worth looking at is the ketogenic diet, which is significantly less vegetables and almost zero carbohydrates, moderate protein, and tons of fat. And the research is also very compelling for ketogenic diets and many cancers. I will say, though, for one, most people that do ketogenic diets do really crappy, dirty ketogenic diets. Like you're buying all these processed foods that are keto, but you're also consuming all of these chemicals and these foods that are not foods. And it's that's not the kind of ketogenic diet I'm talking about. I'm talking about real whole meats and real vegetables and real fats that are like cooked at home and that sort of thing. Lot of great research around that. I will say, though, that keto diets are not for everyone and they're not for every cancer. It is bio-individual according to you and to the type of cancer that you have. So it's worth noting. It's also worth noting that it's a very difficult diet for many people to stay on for any length of period of time. So you won't necessarily see me recommend keto diets for many of my for many of my clients. It's not for everybody, but it can be, from a therapeutic perspective, a very powerful diet option. All right, one last thing before we wrap it up. I just want to send you a note and something to consider, that inside of this whole crappy journey we've been through cancer, maybe the only way out of this is to find a purpose as to what this cancer is going to teach us in any way. And it doesn't have to be all sunshine and rainbows. It could be, for example, you know what? I'm just now realizing that I've been dealing with this crappy situation for way too long and I stayed quiet about it. And now I'm going to do something about it. I have a voice. I have boundaries. I am angry. I am woman. Hear me roar. You know, all of that. Okay. It could be that. It could also be, I've always had a dream of doing this thing, but I've been too scared or too busy or too distracted. But life is too short and I'm going to go after this dream. It could be something good. It can be something powerful. It can be even a matter of, finding your voice, whether it's a happy voice or an angry voice. But I always find that sometimes, even in something so powerful and devastating as cancer, there is always something that we can come out of it to grow in a more meaningful way. So that is it for me. I really hope you got some great information out of that. Feel free to visit my website at minaknowsbreast.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you can even get my protein playbook for breast cancer, which is a document that shares how you can safely eat animal proteins for breast cancer. You're welcome to email me, or you can come visit me on Instagram. My handle is Mina Knows Breast. I share some awesome content on there, so come hang out with me, and I'd love to see you there.
Thank you very much, Mina. That was a fantastic presentation. If anyone has any questions, once again, on the right-hand side of your screen, there is the questions tab, and Shauna says thank you, by the way. So that's very great with that. I was wondering if you want to talk a little bit about just the whole processed food debate in general. You have mentioned a lot, and in nutrition, it's where the common knowledge is to stay away from processed foods. But in your mind, what exactly in the process point, aside from the loss of nutrients, is what is causing some people to say that it causes cancer? Is there anything in your research that says, aside from the leaching of actual nutrients that make it healthy, is there anything else that specifically makes it carcinogenic in the chemical sense?
Well, there are, so this is one of those things that we have decided, that the medical system has decided that there is a correlation of processed meat consumption and colon cancer, for example. Now, exactly what is in that processed meat that causes the colon cancer, I'm not sure that they've actually been able to distinguish that. There are, for example, many processed foods that have nitrates and nitrites, but even nitrates and nitrites are not officially carcinogens according to many of the different kinds of associations that are out there that look into these things. So I can't say definitively like what is actually the carcinogenic compound. I would just say, if anything, you want to look at how these foods are made. So I always have this, like, not that I have proof. Okay, this is a conspiracy theory I'm saying, but I think when you have, say, like a bologna or something, it's made with all the leftover meats that didn't make the cut. Okay, so it's not a beautiful T-bone steak or a ribeye. It's all the leftover, uh, maybe not so fresh and borderline rotting meats, and so then what they do is they take that and process it and boil it and disinfect it and um, put antibiotic drugs in it, and then maybe even add some flavor to it, and boom, you've got sandwich meats, right? So I just can't see from a common sense perspective that that would be healthy for you on a long-term basis. So that's the best I can answer that question.
Mhm. Excellent. So Joyce asks, what sugar substitute do you recommend using?
Okay, so first thing to note is that sometimes it's worthwhile to retrain your taste buds to go without sugar. And it's actually known that if you start eating fresh fruits and vegetables, and you're eating whole animal proteins, and you're eating like really whole foods that have been minimally processed, you'll actually notice that Dairy Queen ice cream that used to be your favorite thing in the world, and then you have it as a treat, you're like, it's like, that is gross. So one thing that you want to note is that it is worthwhile to retrain your taste buds to be fine with sugar not added. Now, having said that, the two options so far that don't seem to cause any issues is stevia and small amounts of monk fruit extract. And other ones that might be problematic are sugar alcohols. So you probably want to stay away from xylitol and erythritol in large amounts anyways, because those just go right through the body. They can, in large amounts, cause a disruption in your microbiome, and it can actually just cause really bad diarrhea if you take too much. And then what's another one that might have been causing problems? Oh, agave is not quite the health food sweetener that you think it is. So if you're thinking of things in moderation, would be stevia extract and monk fruit extract. And then having said that, if you are eating really healthy whole foods 90% of the time, once in a while, have that cake like with real sugar. It's okay to have it once in a while, as long as the majority of your food is really healthy. And if you're going to go have that cake, maybe get a gourmet cake that was made with gourmet ingredients and just really enjoy that slice of cake. So there's that too.
Mhm. Excellent. Janet asks, any advice specifically for someone who had HER2 positive breast cancer?
So with regards to HER2, my understanding is that the drug for HER2 works really well. Works really well. So there's that. The other thing as well is that on the flip side is that it can stress the heart. So you really want to make sure that your cardiovascular health is very healthy. So you want to keep an eye on that, making sure that you're doing light exercises, keeping active to keep that heart healthy. Your heart also loves omega-3 fatty acids, so get lots of wild, fresh fish. Fish can be a little tricky because a lot of them are high in mercury, but there's an acronym out there called SMASH, which you can remember. So they stand for, let's see, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. So those are very high in omega-3s, and they tend to be a lot lower in mercury. You could also consider supplementing with some fish oils, and that will help too. But all the other stuff that I just recommended on this webinar will apply to you as well. So all that nutrition stuff, but that's be some extra things that I might add in there.
Mm-hmm. S. Jordan asks, how does spring water compare with remineralized filtered water?
Ooh, that's a great question. So spring water, it's not super regulated. So spring water comes from water that is just came out of a spring, like the ground. And so if there were heavy metals in that water, it could potentially get into the spring water. So I would say it's better than tap water, maybe not as good as reverse osmosis water. It's one of those things where it's probably good enough, but unless you really tested it, you wouldn't actually really know what's in that water.
Mm-hmm. Jenny, and hello, Jenny. Hello, we've met Jenny before. Are there any concerns with smoked foods on a pellet grill?
Yes, yes, that's the smoke is a concern. Okay, I'll give you another option though. This is not to say that you can't have any joy in life anymore either, right? So it don't have smoked food all the time, but something that you can do is add some very strong antioxidant foods to help reverse or to mitigate or cancel out the effects of the smoke. So two really great herbs are rosemary and thyme. So if you notice that like a lot of grilled steaks, you always grill them with rosemary. So the rosemary has an extremely protective effect. So you kind of maybe want to, if you want to sort of balance that out a little bit, is make sure you make a salad that's got lots of antioxidant herbs and or even add that to the smoked meats and add some rosemary to it and that sort of thing. But it is a concern. Have it in moderation.
Mm-hmm. We have time for a couple more questions. Antolina asks, what are your thoughts on NACA greens?
NACA greens. I'm not familiar with NACA greens. I'm assuming this is like a powdered supplement.
I will just
Yeah.
quickly bring it up. While we wait for just the information to come up, oh, sorry, there it's a. It seems like that it's a brand of Vital Greens.
Mhm.
Liquid, she says, liquid
Okay.
greens.
Okay. So it would really depend. I can't really say for that supplement in particular. I would say look at the ingredients to see if there are any hidden sugars in there or any hidden preservatives in there. Okay. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have that supplement, have that in addition to the vegetables. Have it as like a little extra insurance, a little extra energy boost. Don't have it in replacement of the vegetables.
Mm-hmm. And Joyce asks, what are the trace minerals to add to water?
So there's actually you can totally Google it. There's quite a few different products out there. A very popular one is called Concentrace, and it comes in a dropper, and you just add that to your water.
Mm-hmm. One final question on my end actually comes back to the question about smoking and pellets. You mentioned that it's good to balance it out on that to kind of counteract the the carcinogens in the smoking process. I was wondering how much can that be done with foods in general? I mean, for a very extreme example, is there any way to make a hot dog uncarcinogenic by adding certain things to the hot dog?
Well, I mean, for example, in our household, we source they're not hot dogs, they're sausages. We source them from our local butcher. They only do grass-fed meats. And so we have ours that are custom made with grass-fed beef and all the spices and all that. So, I mean, you can source like a better hot dog in that regard.
Mhm.
And something else that you maybe could do to help mitigate it is like put a sear on it for like a minute and then turn the heat way down. So you kind of get that nice crispy outside, but you don't like, burn the whole thing all the way through. So you help to like preserve some of the heat from getting too hot on the inside. So that's another thing you could do. Overall, so that's the thing you could do for meats in general, like maybe to do a hot sear for like a minute and then turn the heat way down so you can kind of have the best of both worlds. So that's one thing that you could do.
Wonderful. Well, unfortunately, that's all the questions we have for today. Again, if you have any more questions for Mina, here's her email, mina@minaknowsbreast.com. But thank you so much, Mina, for this talk. It's been a very fantastic conversation, and it just is very good to know that there are things that when people can do, not just for an anti-cancer diet, but also just to solve some digestive problems that people have sometimes, like that inflammation, like heartburn. So thank you very much for a very eye-opening conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And it's great to see you all.
Excellent.
Thank
Now,
you.
this webinar was made possible by grants from AbbVie, Amgen, AstraZeneca, Eisai, Bristol Myers Squibb, Janssen, and Merck. It's because of their continued support that we can host the CCSN webinar series and thank them for their commitment to our educational endeavors. I also want to thank our friends at Dense Breast Canada for connecting us with Mina. They have been a great partner in everything we do, and their support does mean a lot to us, so thank you to them. Now, this is one in a series of webinars that we are presenting this fall. Our next one is happening next week. So to stay in the loop about webinars, visit our website or check your email for our e-blasts. If you're not seeing them in your inbox, please check your spam folder because we do use a third-party email service. If not, you might not be registered to our newsletter. You can sign up for a newsletter on our website to not miss a thing that we're doing here at CCSN. And all of our webinars can be found at survivornet.ca/webinar or on CCSN's YouTube channel. And with that, everyone have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you on the next one.